Welcome back to the Medienforum Mittweida and to our next panel, Mossad, SHIN-BET Co. We're about to experience an extraordinary talk with the film experts Alan Rosenthal, Duki Dror and Alex Salah. All three of them have made their very own individual experiences in Israel with the Mossad and are going to be sharing their stories with us today. I'd now like to hand over to the host of this talk. Professor Peter Gottschalk is our expert in TV series and a very regular guest here at the Medienforum Mittweida. Welcome and enjoy this talk.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you. Hello, welcome, Alan and Duki and Alex. I will present you after one. Just as a short prologue. On the 7th of August, 1998, car bombs driven into the embassies, US embassies of Kenya and Tanzania killed 224 men, women and children and wounded round about 4,000 people. Since these attacks, the name of Al-Qaeda became well known around the world. The responsible for these attacks had been Mr. Abdullah Ahmed Abdullah, better known by his nom de guerre, Abu Muhammad al-Masri, later deputy leader of Al-Qaeda. Exactly 22 years later, this 7th of August, Mr. al-Masri was gunned down on the streets of Tehran by two assassins on a motorcycle. Mr. al-Masri was killed along with his daughter Miriam, the widow of Osama bin Laden's son, Hamza bin Laden. It was reported on New York Times, here I have the Süddeutsche Zeitung, that the attack was carried out by Israeli operatives, by Mossad officers. After publishing the killing of Mr. al-Masri and his daughter, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman, Saeed Khatibzadeh, denied the presence of any Qaeda members in Iran. And he warned us, the media, not to fall for the trap of Hollywood scenarios fed to them by American and Zionist officials. Let's fall into this trap. Because reality is always the better fiction. And exactly at the same time, last spring and summer, Tehran, one of the last and very successful Israeli series production, had been screened in Israel and around the world. Duki, you know this series, Tehran, did you see it?
I watched it and I enjoyed it very much. It's very entertaining, I have to say.
Okay. So Duki Dror is our first speaker and guest, one of the best non-fiction filmmakers in Israel. 3 years ago, you produced a wonderful 90 minutes documentary, Duki, Inside Mossad. ARTE screened it in prime time. We screened it together with an interview with you to celebrate. It was a what we call point fort in French. It was a point fort to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the foundation of Israel. And you, Duki, although Mossad is always a closed shop, it's a closed shop, you got them all. Some of the bosses and deputy bosses of Mossad, some officers, some supervising officers. The movie begins with a quite funny sequence where you show how these agents and officers wanted to control you, Duki, to fix the rules of the shooting of these interviews. Tell us, please, how you got them, firstly, and secondly, how you could finally work with these guys, these officers.
Well, this scene, actually, it was the first interview I had on camera from the Mossad operatives. And I remember after that, I did this interview, I was so frustrated, and I told the cameraman, I told everyone around me that this is not going to work because these people are so difficult. You know, you cannot really, they always try to manipulate you, and they try to get to understand how to poke into your brain. And I felt this is going to be a disaster. And actually, everybody was looking at me and they said, "Oh, that was a great interview. What are you talking about?" And then when I looked back at this, I realized how this manipulation shows in the scene and how I can really start and use this as to explain what is this work of being a spy or a Mossad agent. How did I get to get all these, it was on ARTE, it was 90 minutes, but we had a 4-part series on Netflix and Israeli TV. So it was a challenge. Actually, I don't have anything to do with Mossad and never thought about doing before that a film about Mossad. But it was, I think it's always the combination of curiosity, being a very naive person that I am, and optimism. And, these three things suddenly puts you in front of this these 24 interviewees that never spoke before on camera, and it's hard for me to explain that, but it is these three things, and of course a long wait until somebody is calling you back and say, "Oh, okay, let's talk." And it took about 1 year since since the idea came to my mind, and then until someone that is connected to this agency called me back. So it takes a long time to work on these things.
Did you have the feeling that they manipulated you?
Of course, all the time. I felt like it's a check game that you have to play here, and after the first one, after the second one, you understand how to manipulate them because you are in control. You are with the camera behind, and you have.
You went on.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, and you have the tool to poke into their brain and understand. What I really wanted to learn is to understand the mechanism, the psychological mechanism of the people who. Yeah.
You went on to work with them, and last week we screened your Lebanon movie, also a 90 minutes movie too. German title, Libanon, Gefangen im Chaos. So this was what happened in August. You were working already a long time about the Lebanon, and Lebanon, it's a history of, it's a great stuff. And there are good guys and bad guys. There are pretty girls at swimming pools. You got Volker Schlöndorff, who was shooting The Circle of Deceit, Die Fälschung with Bruno Ganz and Hanna Schigula in the middle of the Lebanese civil war. What was your, Duki, what was your fascination of the Lebanon?
It started when we finished Mossad, and the most interesting story for me in Mossad chapter, I would say, is the Lebanese chapter. And I thought this is, as you said, it has everything to create a drama. Good guys, bad guys, swimming pools, whatever you need to create a very strong dramatic story, and also history and a lot of politics. Very complicated politics. And I told my my partner, Reinhard Beetz, and I said, let's do something about maybe a TV drama. This is an amazing stuff for a TV drama. Let's start to work on this. And I started to do some research for the TV drama. And then we met again, and we said, I think it was after Ken Burns' documentary on Vietnam came out, and I said, we said, oh, let's do the documentary, and then we'll see about the TV drama. Yeah, and that's how it evolved. Actually, this is how it started. But my fascination is also, you know, I was in Lebanon as a soldier in '82 in my required army service. I didn't fight there, but I was there, and I know that this generation who was in the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, are my friends, my generation.
Yeah, the Lebanon, Duki, is a part of, you mentioned Netflix. On Netflix you have Why Heroes Fly, and all of us, as we know, the documentaries, Waltz with Bashir, one of the first documentary animated, was also this trauma. What I admire in your movies, Duki, is, well, I just describe it, as we do not have the time always to show clips. When you did the Mossad, then you have a street and there are bones. Yeah. Then you have, as Mossad is part of the intelligence, you do something like a sort of shadow reenactment. It's a world of shadows. How do you get your ideas to direct, Duki?
Can you tell really intuitive.
In 2 minutes?
You know, I strongly believe that when it comes only later, after you really form your content, you understand what is the content, what is the story exactly, and then you come up with the style or with the ideas how to visualize it. That's what happens to me usually, and it can happen, you know, during, you know, the one morning I said, okay, I have camera and I always try to do stuff and so I woke up this one morning and I said, I'm going to the beach with the camera. I'm taking a few photos and I want to see what's going on there, and some glasses, eyeglasses, and started to work with these elements, with these details, and see how it can create some kind of visual story or elements to the story, and it's kind of intuitive. It's not something that you know, I think about it as logically. It just, you know, it just start to form, and then it forms more and more with more elements. So that's what happened usually. So in other films that I did.
Yeah, thank you, Duki. Duki, just where are you now in Israel? Where are you?
I'm at home in Binyamina,
okay.
Which is
so we move
town between Haifa and Tel Aviv.
Okay. So we move now. It's nearby the coast, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we move now.
It's raining like hell today.
From Duki, we move now a little bit from the coast to Jerusalem. To our friend Alan Rosenthal, who was already twice in Mittweida. He knows knows Mittweida. He was there twice already. He's now the third time guest in this way, virtual. My friend Professor Alan Rosenthal, he is a filmmaker, a wonderful filmmaker. But the story now I would like to tell him. To tell us is that Alan, he was professor at the Hebrew University. He did tons of movies, documentaries, reenactment, docudrama, and he knows the world. He was teaching around the world. So, but now the beginning, as we are talking about Mossad and these intelligence services as stuff of filmmaking, like you did, he came in a direct contact to one of the first actions what the Mossad did when they kidnapped Eichmann in Argentina. And he was beginning then his wonderful career as a TV producer and a TV and filmmaker. And just Alan now, tell us, to make a long story short, tell us how you came in contact with Eichmann, the result of the kidnapping of Mossad in Argentina.
Okay, good morning, Peter. Good morning, everybody. I'd come to Israel to try and do a film on children of the kibbutzim. By fluke and circumstances, I finished up as the assistant producer to the man who's running the televising of the Eichmann trial. There's a special team brought over from England and America to cover the trial, as there was no television in Israel at that time. So I watched Eichmann for 4 to 5 months. I was very young, 22, something like that, and watching this guy day in, day out, wondering, who is he? Who is this man? The first impressions was rather gaunt man, balding, very unpleasant, no reactions at all from this man. Questions were asked on him, terrible stories were told about death camps, and his face was totally impassive the whole time. And you said, who on earth is he? The few times he sort of cracked up, the one time that I remember very strongly, where there was an inside view of Eichmann, was they were showing pictures of the concentration camps. There were documentary films from the concentration camps, and they turned off all the lights in the hall or in the trial room. But one light was over Eichmann. So while everybody was looking at the pictures of the death camps and so on, I could see Eichmann. And as the thing that astonished me, as bulldozers were putting dead bodies into the pits, Eichmann took off his glasses and he appeared to be laughing. I couldn't believe it. Was it just face gestures that he was relaxing? But he seemed to be laughing at the bodies going into the pits. Now, I couldn't quite believe this. And one of my jobs was to cut an hour tape from the trial for sending abroad. So in the evening, I looked at the tapes again, and he seemed to be smiling. Maybe it was just the facial gesture, I don't know. But after that, it haunted me. Who was this guy? Who was the real Eichmann? And it haunted me for years. Then, maybe 10, 15 years later, a friend of mine said, I want to make a film about Eichmann's messages to the judges. Because when he was in jail, waiting for his sentence, Eichmann wrote long speeches to the judges. So, all right. And those were held in secret for about 30 years. They were released and we decided to make a film about his speeches. But as I went through this stuff, it was the most boring stuff imaginable. I did nothing wrong, said Eichmann. I was just a cog in the wheel. I was nothing. I was a small mine official. There was no film there. And then I came across something very interesting. In the mid-50s, before Eichmann was arrested by the Mossad, he spent about 6 months talking to a Dutch ex-Waffen-SS officer called Sassen. And Sassen taped Eichmann for about 6 months. And Eichmann was still on the run. This was in Argentina. He was free. And it seemed to me the real Eichmann then came out. He was saying things like, was I an ass? Was I an ape? Of course I knew what I was doing. I was doing fine work for the Reich. And when one of the lieutenant colonel refused to go ahead with this slaughtering of Jews and so on, Eichmann challenged this guy to a duel. What do you mean you refuse to do this? This is the work of the Reich. And suddenly a different Eichmann was coming out. He knew what he was doing. He said, but we covered everything up. We didn't say kill. We said, take them to a final destination. Take them to the east. Keep it quiet. But of course, everybody knew what we were doing. because the birds were chirping in the trees. Everybody knew. And even, I was trying to find who he was, and I found an interview with the guy who ran the Auschwitz camp. I forget his name for the moment. And the head of the Auschwitz camp said, Eichmann came to see me as I was putting people into the death chambers. And Eichmann said, look, I said, we shouldn't send the children in. And Eichmann said, no, the children have to go in because they are the next generation. That, to me, was the real Eichmann. And it's something I'll never forget. It affected me very, very much. Maybe that's why, going through the 4 months or 5 months of the trial, that's why I'm in Israel now, because it had an effect on me. I was born in England, in London. Had I been born 40 miles away in France, maybe I wouldn't have survived the war. So anyway, after that, so we made this film and called it The Secret Memoirs of Adolf Eichmann. And I think it's one of the better films I made. One of the most important films, anyway.
Thank you for this thrilling story. Just to add one story more, Israel, it seems to me sometimes like a village, because Alan, he knows them all. Another story for the moment on Netflix is The Spy, directed by Gideon Raff, about the top Mossad spy Eli Cohen, and his cover name was Kamel Amin Tabit. He was publicly executed, hanged in the middle of Damascus on the 18th of May, 1965. He's an Israeli hero. Streets and schools are named Eli Cohen School, Eli Cohen Street. Alan, he is living nearby Eli Cohen Street. You know the family of the actor who Sacha Baron Cohen. Tell us in 3 sentences the story of Cohen, please, Alan.
But by chance, I happen to know Sacha Baron Cohen's father. I won't say we grew up together, but in my early 20s, I knew him very well as a friend. So I was at his house. I met his wife, Daniela. She was a very, very good photographer. And of course, I met, my friend was called Jerry, and he had 3 sons. And one was Sacha. The middle one, I think, was a musician. And the other one I didn't know very well. But it was a family full of life, full of humor. The father, particularly Jerry, was always cracking jokes. No sentence was there without a joke. But I wondered about Sacha.
Alan, why is Cohen such a hero in Israel? Why is Cohen such a hero? Why is Cohen, Eli Cohen, such a hero, such a great hero?
It took enormous guts to go and live somewhere for months, for years, and you're playing a totally different person. Now, this actually wasn't the first time the Mossad did it. Before Eli Cohen, they were running a program, which Duki probably knows much more about than I do, called Ulysses. And with this program, the Mossad were planting Israelis in Arab villages, this is in I think the 50s, the early 60s, to grow up there, to marry in the village, to integrate in the village, and then bring the information back to Israel. So there was Eli Cohen, in a sense, had a predecessor. Why is a hero? Because Israel was under threat. He had to know what was going on in Syria. And Eli Cohen was the one man who brought masses of information back. So everybody, they didn't know much about him at the time, and probably it's only in the last few years that the real story of Eli Cohen has come out. But he's absolutely admired everywhere.
Yeah. Alan, Israel loves not only series, Israel loves also documentaries, and you directed and wrote and produced a documentary since more than 40 years. Your waves of freedom were close to British Secret Service. You interviewed Rabin, who was murdered now 25 years ago, and you interviewed and worked with Abba Eban. You were, as a director and author, always close to politics and intelligence. Tell us about working as a director and producer in Israel.
I was lucky that when I started working with Israel, came there to help set up the television, because Israel had no television until about 1968. And it was a wonderful chance to show Israel to itself. So at first, I was looking at the normal, many things, kibbutzim, musicians, children, go everywhere, do films very fast. We're working on very low budgets, but you'd shoot a film in 3 days, you'd edit it in 3 days, and that was up. They weren't great films, but you sort of learned the trade there. But it was wonderful mixing with everybody. You learn that normally you could come in and interview a person that would take 5 minutes. But if you were interviewing an Arab, you had to sit down, you had a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, then finally you could get to the real things. But what actually happened was, after a while, I was very lucky. I had an American partner, and making films at Israel Television was a little bit difficult because the budgets were low, and also there was a kind of minor censorship. This you could say, this you couldn't say. You couldn't really at those times go into religion. You couldn't really do dramas. You couldn't really make films about politics, which was all changed, I have to say. So I started getting interested in the foreign markets. And then suddenly, I don't know, I fell into making films about murderers. I made a film about Stalin, then I made a film about Hitler, then I made a film about Eichmann's secret memoirs, and I found it was, I won't say fascinated, that it's more interesting to make films about the evil people than the angels. It's silly to say that, but I was fascinated by history, and making films about historical things actually interested me, and still does, a little bit more than making films about politics. I'm not a good analyst of politics. Duki is probably much better than I am on that. But the past fascinated me, the history and so on.
Thank you for the moment, Alan. Great. So we learned Israel is a very important production country for TV and for filmmaking. And we just moved now. Normally he is also living in Israel, but for the moment he is in Paris, I suppose. Alex, right? You are in Paris for the moment.
I'm in Paris, yeah.
Alex Salah, he is a colleague of mine. He was he was a director in the sense of Direktor, not in the sense of Realisateur at ARTE France. He is a commissioning editor, and he commissioned a lot. I tell you, some hundreds of movies and documentaries. And just to mention Israel, Alex was responsible for a documentary about the last Prime Minister Ben Gurion. He developed new formats, and for example, also a format 24 hours Jerusalem. Alex, some years ago, ARTE France brought Hatufim, what is Hatufim in Hebrew, to Europe, written and directed by Gideon Raff, also as one of the most successful series in the world. The story of 3 prisoners of war. We prepared a clip, but we'll, as we are running out of time, we stay with you, Alex. Hatufim is the model for Homeland, and the story of these 3 prisoners of war kidnapped for 17 years to Lebanon and to Syria was after then developed to Homeland. Why are Israeli series so successful around the world, Alex?
For a lot of reasons, certainly. I think that the Israeli series Hatufim, or even in treatment, is more known Betipul, because the series were done by the Americans. Homeland and In Treatment with Gabriel Burns is very well known, and then In Treatment now is a copy, an example that is going to be made in a lot of countries. And I know that it's in production here in France too. It took a while until the French and ARTE decided to adapt the topic, the theme to the French situations. And the two directors, Toledano and Nakash, are now directing the new series. It's certainly because it's all the topics are very close, and you can identify to any one of the characters. Certainly, also it's the way that the storytelling is built, the narrative structure, the play of the actors, and the combination of different competences. But I think that it's also because the series are not afraid to deal with very deep and huge issues for the society. And I think that it's the way that the people are thinking, perhaps because they are speaking and they are in the middle of conflict, contradictions, and political, social issues. They needed to find a way to express that. And certainly the series is a very good way to express that.
Alex, in 2013, The Gatekeepers, written and directed by Dror, was shortlisted for the Oscars. Your department commissioned this 90 minutes documentary. And it was the same situation as for Duki's Mossad. Before, nobody inside the Shin-Bet was talking about his job in front of a camera. Finally, 6 former directors of Shin-Bet told their stories, including, I tell you, my favorite, Avraham Shalom, who passed away, may the Eternal bless his soul, and who captured Eichmann in Argentina. Why finally did they talk? What and you knew the project, so tell us about this movie.
I knew the project from the beginning, but I asked the same question to Dror Moret, the director. He told me simply, you know what, it was a good timing. It was the moment where all the process with the peace discussions with the Palestinians were out. Were breaking down, and they wanted certainly to have any impact on the process, and then they decided to speak. I think it's linked to that. As today you have a lot of generals and people from the Mossad and Shin-Bet that are struggling and fighting for the peace process, and they are involved in different movements. You have the Refusniks, and you have CIS, and you have a lot of other movements that are trying to impact and to influence the political decision, even if it doesn't appear, and it's not exactly what they are expecting or thinking it would have as influence and impact, but it's the way it's working. They are people who are very they are recognized. They have in a way the confidence of the population, and this is the reason they have a role to play inside the political sides of the Israeli society.
Mm-hmm. Alex, as you commissioned really tons of movies, and like this, The Gatekeepers, you see the paper, and now you have to think about and to put money and to develop and also. So, one simple question: what makes a successful? We talked about series, but also a successful documentary. What is it? Is it just only the stuff? What makes it?
it's
You know,
it's a
students
difficult
are listening.
question.
You know,
No, it's a difficult question because you know, at the beginning when you are reading a project, it's only a promise of a movie. You don't know exactly what the movie is going to be. It's a promise, and you want that promise. So it works on your own imagination. But after that, I think that as how can I say, responsible of the geopolitical department and documentaries, what was important also was the new approach. What is going to be said, what is going to be told, and it has to be different. It has to be deeper. It has to be how can I say, totally different than the other movies we have seen before. If it's to repeat, if it's to be redundant, it has no interest. And always in the way to choose the movies, it was first how it's going to be made. Even at the beginning, I'm not sure that the director knows exactly how he's going to build. But we have a red line, we have a narrative structure. We know more or less the people who are going to be involved. And it was, let's say, one of the first time that these people from the Mossad and Shin-Bet were speaking. So it was very important. And I think that because of that, it has that impact, and and the documentary that turns as the other movie that ARTE took from Duki Dror as a series. In Israel, it was broadcasted as a series. Here, for ARTE and in Europe, it was only a 90-minute length movie or 252s. But in Israel, it's always series because the people are very attractive and everyone can identify to what they are saying, explaining, and revealing to. It's a sort of revelation, and it's great to have inside a movie revelations.
Mm-hmm. Alex, would you know, it's we are doing this for the University of Mittweida, and at the faculties there are many young people who want to do a career like you, filmmaker, directors, and so on. So would you give the advice to our students listening and participating here to do their internship, what is called en français le stage, de devenir stagiaire, their stage in an Israeli production company? And if yes, how to manage this?
I'm not sure that it's necessary. You know, it's more the, you know, you have to stay curious and to stay how can I say, very curious about stories, because it's the discovery of a new story, the discovery of a character, the discovery of a person who suddenly is going to tell you an amazing story, and then to think how you are going to take that story and to transform it in a movie, because it's impossible always to turn it as a movie, documentary or feature length. It depends. But what is important, the stages can be done in Israel, and certainly you can ask Alan Rosenthal, you can ask Duki Dror, you can ask me to find links to production companies and to directors, and perhaps to organize that. But I think that you can be you can find stages even in Germany, in France, anywhere in the world, but just stay curious and think about the storytelling. That is one of the most important things. Doesn't matter what gender, feature, documentary, thriller, geopolitical, the story is the most important thing to find.
Mm-hmm. Storytelling. Yeah. So we are at here in Paris time at 12:55. So there, as be now the frequently asked questions. Are there some questions? And die Regie, habt ihr welche auflaufen? Wie machen wir das?
Well, due to the time, and since we only have 4 minutes left, we decided to not have any questions from the community, but I can tell you they were all very interested and really enjoyed this talk. And so I can say too, I really enjoyed this talk and these very versatile insights on a topic we don't usually get to talk about very often. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Professor Alan Rosenthal, Duki Dror, Alex Seller, and Professor Peter Gottschalk for this talk. Thank you very much.